"You're just his past," the mistress said. Her billionaire husband didn't know her papers were ready. The board expulsion memo was clipped beneath Maya Sinclair's Red Seed withdrawal protocol before Donovan Royce even finished calling it a restructuring. The paper sat in her hand like a warning flare against the polished green of the high-tech greenhouse. Donovan stood in a black suit beside the climate control wall, his name glowing on the estate access screen. Isabella Croft, wrapped in an ivory blazer, over a white silk dress, moved between the experimental wheat rows, as if the plants had been waiting for her approval. "You're just his past," she said, light enough for the cameras near the glass wall to miss the cruelty. Maya looked at the memo. Her board seat had been removed. Her lab access had been scheduled for termination. Her research wing had been renamed for a brand campaign. Then she understood. This was not restructuring. This was erasure. Donovan expected pain to make her negotiate. Isabella expected humiliation to make her small. Maya did neither. She uncapped the red pen attached to the clipboard and signed the seed withdrawal protocol with one clean motion. Then she signed. Donovan's hand shifted toward the document, but Maya had already turned the clipboard away from him. "That paper does not affect active cultivation," he said, too quickly. It was the voice he used when investors needed confidence and scientists needed silence. Maya did not correct him in front of the orchids, the sensor towers, and the rows of drought-resistant seedlings she had designed, through 3 failed harvest seasons and 1 winter of near bankruptcy. She had corrected him for years. She was finished donating clarity to a man who used it as costume jewelry. Isabella's eyes moved to the red clipboard, then back to Maya's face, searching for the public breakdown her followers would understand. Maya gave her nothing. Not a tear, not a speech, not even the dignity of being answered. She walked to the central workstation and placed her thumb against the biometric reader. The screen recognized her for exactly 14 more minutes. That was enough. She opened the sequence archive, confirmed the latest encrypted backup, and transferred the primary genetic sequence logs into the secure drive already waiting inside her red leather handbag. Donovan frowned. "Maya, do not make this emotional." She looked at him then, not as a wife, not as a rival, but as a scientist studying a contaminated sample. "Preserve that sentence," she said. The quiet assistant near the glass doors lowered their eyes and recorded the timestamp. Maya entered the withdrawal reference number into the estate compliance system. The seed line authorization field changed from active commercial use to author review required. No alarm came. No dramatic warning filled the room. The green rose stayed beautiful for the moment, which made Donovan braver than he should have been. He still believed a living system failed loudly. Maya knew better. Most living systems failed in silence long before the rot became visible. She removed her access badge from her blazer, set it on the workstation, and kept the red clipboard under her arm. "You can keep the greenhouse," she said. "I'm taking my work." Donovan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Those seeds were grown on my land." Maya paused at the glass door. Behind him, Isabella stood beneath a suspended grow light, framed like the new face of a future she had not built. Maya felt the wound land, deep and private, but she did not let it spread. Pain could wait. Protocol could not. She sent one message to the senior lawyer: "File the withdrawal now." She sent another to the downtown lab contact: "Prepare cold storage and clean benches by tonight." Then she locked the growth activation code behind her personal author key, the one clause Donovan had never bothered to read, because he thought ownership lived in deeds, fences, and photographs. The greenhouse door opened to the private service path. Maya walked out, before anyone could decide whether to stop her. By the time Donovan looked back at the screen, the first legal notice had already appeared under his company's seal. The file stayed red. Maya did not drive toward the house Donovan still called theirs. She turned away from the estate gates and took the service road past the testing fields, past the irrigation tanks, past the long black fence he believed made him sovereign. Her phone kept lighting, with restricted calls from the executive office, but she let every one of them disappear unanswered. The red clipboard rested on the passenger seat. The secure drive sat inside her handbag. The growth activation code remained locked behind her author key. For 11 miles, she did not think about marriage. She counted assets. Sequence logs, lab notebooks, premarital research clauses, independent trial data, climate stress algorithms, the original activation architecture. Her hands stayed steady on the wheel. Her chest did not. When she reached the temporary downtown lab space she had rented months earlier under a holding company Donovan never asked about, she parked behind the building and sat in the quiet. The room upstairs had no marble, no living wall, no investor balcony, no curated scent of basil and citrus drifting through filtered air. It had a steel table, 2 refrigerators, a locked cabinet, and a small window facing an alley. It was enough. Maya carried the clipboard inside, set the secure drive on the table, and removed her red blazer with the careful motion of a woman taking off armor without surrendering the war. Then the wound found her. Not loudly, not with collapse. It arrived in the shape of a memory. Donovan standing beside her during the first successful drought trial, his hand on her shoulder, telling a room full of donors that love had taught him to trust nature. At the time, she had mistaken the line for gratitude. Now she understood it had been rehearsal. He had been learning how to speak over her while standing close enough to look devoted. That was the break. Maya did not hurt most because Isabella had mocked her. Isabella was only the polished surface of the insult. Maya hurt because Donovan had taken the most sacred part of her work, the patient intelligence required to keep food alive under pressure, and turned it into scenery for a woman who knew how to pose beside a leaf. He had not replaced Maya with love. He had replaced her with ease. Then she understood again. He wanted a woman who would admire the harvest without asking who wrote the code. Maya opened the locked cabinet and placed the secure drive inside a fire-rated evidence box. She took out the oldest lab notebook, the one with coffee stains on the cover and red tabs marking the first survival sequences. Her handwriting filled the margins in tight, disciplined lines. She had written those notes before the estate existed, before Donovan's investors knew the word climate resilient, before anyone called him a visionary. He had owned the land. She had authored the pulse. That difference had just become her first weapon. Maya photographed the notebook index, uploaded the images to a protected legal archive, and sent the timestamp to the senior lawyer. "Preserve authorship chain," she wrote. 2 minutes later, the reply came back, received. Filing in progress. She did not smile. She did not need satisfaction yet. She needed order. On the steel table, she made 3 columns on a red legal pad. What Donovan controlled, what he assumed he controlled, and what belonged to her. Under the first column, she wrote estate, cameras, boardroom, public narrative. Under the second, she wrote seed line, harvest timeline, government confidence, Isabella's brand. Under the third, she wrote activation code, original sequence logic, author rights, biological intuition. The final words made her stop. Biological intuition. Donovan had always hated that phrase because investors responded to it. He preferred systems, infrastructure, scale, words with steel in them. He did not understand that life survived by reading what power ignored. Maya picked up the red pen and drew one line beneath the third column. No more permission. Before midnight, she requested cold storage transfer, revoked shared access to the activation architecture, and scheduled a private call with the government research partners who had trusted her trial data long before they trusted the Royce name. She placed the red clipboard beside the first tray of dormant seeds waiting in the downtown refrigerator. They looked plain, almost forgettable. So had she, to him, once he thought the deed was secure. Maya closed the refrigerator door and turned the lock. The future was small enough to fit in her hand and alive enough to ruin a kingdom. By morning, Maya had stopped moving like a woman who had been expelled and started moving like the original author of a system correcting its ownership records. The downtown lab still looked temporary from the outside, a narrow brick building between a closed print shop and a private loading dock, but inside, she arranged it with the precision of a seed vault. Cold storage on the north wall, clean benches under white task lights, secure terminal facing away from the windows. Red clipboard at the center of the steel table. She did not decorate the room. She activated it. The senior lawyer arrived first, carrying no drama, only a slim legal case and the tired calm of someone who knew paperwork could cut deeper than public outrage. Maya handed over the signed seed withdrawal protocol, the notebook index, the original sequence summaries, and the chain of authorship she had preserved before the Royce estate had ever poured its first foundation. File under technical authorship and restricted commercial deployment, Maya said. The senior lawyer read the clause twice. Then he looked up. He overlooked this. He overlooked me, Maya answered. That was the difference. The compliance officer joined by secure call and confirmed the first suspension notices would reach Royce Agritech's licensing division before noon. Not a lawsuit, not a spectacle, a procedural narrowing of what Donovan could legally claim, sell, scale, or promise without the original author's authorization. Maya preferred that. Spectacle gave arrogant men a stage. Procedure took away the floor. She opened the activation architecture map on the terminal, and the screen filled with branching seed families, stress triggers, growth response gates, and the hidden sequencing logic that allowed the Royce experimental wheat to survive heat spikes above 105 degrees Fahrenheit. Donovan had called it resilience. Isabella had called it green luxury. Maya called it earned behavior. Plants did not perform for cameras. They responded to instruction, pressure, timing, and memory. She selected the Royce estate line and changed the deployment status to dormant, pending author review. Then she backed up the action with the legal reference number. Preserve the chain. Across town, Donovan began his counteroffensive exactly as she expected. He called an emergency executive session inside the estate conference room, beneath a wall-sized photograph of the greenhouse at peak bloom. He wore a black wool blazer that made him look severe enough for investors and calm enough for cameras. Isabella sat at his right in a pearl-white blouse, scrolling through draft captions about renewal, legacy, and women leading nature forward. Donovan spoke of land rights, capital investment, infrastructure ownership, and the Royce name. He did not say activation code. He did not say Maya's sequence logic. He did not say author. Every omission exposed him. When the board representative asked whether the seed withdrawal protocol affected the upcoming government demonstration harvest, Donovan gave a polished answer about redundant systems and operational continuity. His jaw tightened before the final word. A small fracture. There it was. Maya had seen that expression for years whenever a scientist received more attention than he did. He resented expertise because it refused to flatter him. He resented Maya most because her mind made his empire believable. At the downtown lab, Maya watched the meeting transcript arrive through authorized counsel and marked only the lines that mattered. My land. My company. My harvest. Never her work. Donovan's false belief was now on record. He thought the container owned the life inside it. She took a red pen and circled the phrase operational continuity. That is where he will lie next, she said. The lab technician paused beside the cold storage unit. Do you want a press statement prepared? Maya shook her head. Not yet. Truth did not need to arrive first. It needed to arrive clean. She spent the afternoon contacting the government research partners who had evaluated the seed trials before Royce Agritech turned them into a luxury sustainability story. She did not ask them to choose sides. She sent data, original trial dates, authorship records, withdrawal terms, activation dependencies. By sunset, 2 partners had requested independent verification. One had paused the demonstration endorsement, and one had asked whether Maya could provide an alternative seed architecture outside Roy's control. That question stayed with her, so she moved. She opened a blank project file and named it Sinclair Civic Grain Initiative. No mansion, no husband, no borrowed gate, just a clean system, a lawful claim, and a seed line that would never again be used to decorate someone else's insecurity. Arrogant men often forget that the soil does not obey the man who owns the fence. It only answers to the one who understands the seed. That is the quiet danger in confusing possession with creation. A deed can lock a gate. A board vote can remove a name from a chair. A black suit can make theft look like strategy when the lighting is expensive enough. But living things keep their own record. They remember temperature, pressure, drought, injury, timing, and the person who taught them how to survive. Maya Sinclair had spent years listening to what Donovan Royce only wanted to brand. He looked at land and saw dominion. She looked at a seed and saw instruction waiting for discipline. That was why his betrayal did not make her reckless. It made her accurate. Accuracy is colder than anger. By the next morning, the downtown lab no longer felt temporary. It felt claimed. Maya stood in the center of the narrow facility wearing a deep red blouse beneath a fitted lab coat, her red clipboard resting beside the secure terminal like a flag no one had voted on. The cold storage units held the dormant seed trays transferred overnight. The clean benches had been sterilized. The data wall showed 3 active folders: authorship chain, withdrawal compliance, and Sinclair's civic grain initiative. No marble, no donor balcony, no living wall arranged for photographs. Good. The room did not need to impress people who could not read the work. Start with survival behavior, Maya told the lab technician. Not yield. The instruction mattered. Donovan had always wanted yield first, because yield photographed well for investors. Maya wanted survival first, because hunger did not care about luxury branding. She opened the original sequence family and began rebuilding the architecture outside the Royce ecosystem. The first step was not invention. It was purification. Remove every proprietary dependency tied to Royce infrastructure. Preserve the climate stress gates. Separate the activation logic from estate-controlled servers. Confirm that the new line could germinate without touching a single contested license. She worked for 6 straight hours, not because she was trying to outrun grief, but because grief behaved better when given a task. Then she paused. On the steel table, beneath the oldest lab notebook, she found a photograph from the first drought trial. She and Donovan stood shoulder to shoulder in a field that had almost failed. His arm was around her. Her eyes were on the wheat. Even then, the picture had told the truth. He had been looking at the camera. She had been looking at the work. Maya turned the photograph face down and placed the red clipboard over it. Not this time. The senior lawyer called through the secure line and confirmed that Royce Agritech had received the withdrawal notice, along with the restricted deployment warning. Donovan's office had responded with a demand for immediate reinstatement of commercial authority, written in the language of men who believed urgency could replace permission. Maya read the demand once. Then she marked it with a red pen. Denied pending author review. The words looked small. They were not. Across the room, the lab technician loaded the first tray into the growth chamber. The new seed architecture would begin with a controlled heat stress simulation at 108 degrees Fahrenheit, followed by drought cycling and nutrient interruption. No cameras. No speeches. Just proof. Maya watched the chamber seal, then looked at the first clean data stream appearing on the monitor. This was the new arena Donovan had never understood. Not the estate. Not the board. Not the glossy greenhouse, where Isabella could pose under suspended lights and call herself a steward of nature. Here, power moved through sequence, restraint, documented authorship, and repeatable truth. Maya typed the project motto into the internal file. Food security is not branding. It is responsibility. The line held. Outside, the city kept moving beyond the narrow windows, indifferent and alive. Inside, the first dormant seeds entered the trial cycle under her name alone. Maya placed both hands on the steel table and let the silence settle into something stronger than comfort. Foundation. Donovan Royce chose the East Greenhouse for the Livestream Sustainability Tour because the East Greenhouse still looked perfect from a distance. Its glass roof caught the morning light cleanly. Its center aisle was wide enough for cameras, investors, and government partners to walk without seeing the restricted service panels behind the climate wall. The experimental wheat rows stood tall in polished symmetry, their first signs of stress hidden beneath the upper canopy, where only a trained eye would look. Donovan knew presentation. He had built half his empire on it. He entered in a black tailored suit, with a black silk tie, every inch the founder who expected the room to arrange itself around his confidence. Isabella Croft followed in a cream satin dress beneath an ivory blazer, holding a small basket of seed packets printed, with her new campaign title, Mother of Tomorrow. She looked luminous. She looked prepared. She looked useless. Today is about continuity. Donovan told the cameras, his voice warm enough for donors and firm enough for markets. Royce Agritech remains committed to feeding the future. Isabella stepped beside him and lifted one of the packets, as if it contained a prayer instead of a regulated genetic asset. Sustainability is not just science, she said. It is grace. It is beauty. It is trust. The lead journalist near the first row wrote something down. The government partners did not. That was the first difference. Donovan noticed it and compensated with a broader gesture toward the plants. Our systems are fully operational, he said. This estate was designed for resilience. He avoided one word. Author. In the downtown lab, Maya watched the public feed, without sound, reading the room, through posture, sequence timing, and plant color. The red clipboard lay beside her keyboard. The new trial seeds inside her growth chamber had passed their first heat cycle overnight. Donovan's estate line had not. She enlarged the frame around the base of the greenhouse row and saw the faint gray beginning at the lowest sheath. Too early for cameras. Not too early for truth. Pause there, she told the lab technician. The technician froze the frame. Maya marked the visual timestamp and added it to the restricted compliance file. Preserve the pattern. Back at the estate, Isabella led the tour toward a staged tasting table decorated with wheat stalks, white linen, and engraved cards explaining Royce Agritech's mission in elegant language that said almost nothing. She smiled at the cameras, but when a government partner asked her to explain how the seed line adjusted under extreme heat stress, her answer turned soft and circular. Nature teaches us balance, she said, and Donovan's vision gives that balance a home. The lead journalist looked from Isabella to Donovan. Is the activation architecture still under Roy's control after Dr. Sinclair's withdrawal filing? The air changed. Donovan did not look angry. That would have been too honest. He looked offended, as if Maya's name had been a weed growing through polished stone. Maya's contributions were part of a much larger corporate platform, he said. No single person defines this company. A small sentence. A large confession. He needed the world to believe genius could be absorbed into infrastructure once it became inconvenient. He needed Maya to become a contribution, not the architect. Isabella touched his sleeve, a delicate public gesture meant to soften him, but he pulled half an inch away before he caught himself. The camera did not miss it. Neither did the board representative standing near the irrigation console. Donovan continued the tour, with brighter language and tighter hands. He spoke about acreage, capital investment, proprietary facilities, distribution contracts, and international demand. He spoke like a man building a wall of nouns around a missing verb. The missing verb was grow. Then the lead journalist asked whether Royce Agritech could demonstrate independent activation without Sinclair authorization. Donovan gave a measured look toward the climate control wall. We are not dependent on anyone who chooses to abandon the mission. There it was. His wound, dressed as leadership. He did not hate Maya because she left. He hated that she could leave with something he could not buy, charm, rename, or photograph. Isabella raised her basket higher for the final camera pass, still performing abundance, while the first lower leaves behind her began to dull. The live stream comments filled with hearts, slogans, and investor optimism. Donovan saw the numbers rising and mistook attention for safety. Maya closed the feed before the tour ended. She had seen enough. In the growth chamber beside her, the Sinclair trial line pushed its first pale shoots through the test medium, quiet and exact. Donovan had applause. Maya had germination. The system did not turn against Donovan Royce all at once. It turned the way living things fail when ignored by powerful people, first in data, then in color, then in confidence. By Monday morning, the East greenhouse reported a 3-point drop in root uptake across the showcase rows. By noon, the western trial beds showed uneven stress response under standard heat cycling. By evening, 2 remote farms in Arizona and South Texas had paused expansion because the Royce estate line was not recovering after controlled drought intervals. Donovan called it a calibration issue. The plants disagreed. Their lower leaves dulled, from green to gray at the edges, not dramatically enough for panic, but clearly enough for every trained agronomist in the room to stop pretending. The compliance officer sent a restricted deployment reminder. The investor relations officer requested approved language for market inquiries. The board representative asked for independent verification of activation authority. Every sentence was polite. Every sentence removed power. At the downtown lab, Maya received the first forwarded report through counsel and read it beside the growth chamber, where the Sinclair Civic Grain Initiative had entered its second test cycle. Her seedlings were small, pale, and honest. Donovan's were tall, expensive, and beginning to rot from the wrong assumptions. She did not celebrate. Food systems were not toys. Failed crops meant failed promises, and failed promises had consequences beyond a billionaire's pride. That was why she had built protocols instead of revenge fantasies. Separate public safety data from corporate liability, she told the senior lawyer. If government partners request non-Royce alternatives, we respond through verified channels. Then she opened a new file, Emergency Food Security Readiness. Across town, Donovan stood inside the estate command room beneath 3 screens showing declining crop performance. He wore a charcoal executive suit and the expression of a man waiting for reality to apologize. The lab team gave him possibilities: server lag, nutrient imbalance, humidity drift, sensor interference. Each answer was partial. None of them touched the missing center. Run the activation sequence again, Donovan ordered. The lead technician hesitated, without naming what everyone knew. We do not have full author clearance. The room went still. Donovan looked at the screen, as if the right arrangement of money could unlock it. This facility belongs to Royce Agritech, he said. No one argued. They did not have to. The facility belonged to him. The permission did not. That was the turn. Isabella tried to keep the public face alive, with a second live stream from the greenhouse walkway, this time framed closer, with white orchids in the foreground and the wheat rows softened behind her. She spoke about patience, renewal, and the courage of sustainable innovation. But the comments changed. Viewers began asking why the plants behind her looked gray. A former agronomy consultant posted a question about activation failure. The lead journalist clipped her earlier answer about Grace and placed it beside the new footage. Beauty met evidence. Evidence 1. By Wednesday, a government partner formally requested technical clarification before the National Food Security hearing. By Thursday, 2 distribution partners postponed their rollout language. By Friday, the board demanded a closed briefing on whether Donovan had commercial authority to deploy the disputed seed line without Maya's original activation architecture. Donovan's voice sharpened in every meeting, but sharpness was not control. He kept repeating the same mistake in different rooms: my land, my company, my harvest, my infrastructure. The more he said it, the more the missing word grew larger. Her code. In the downtown facility, Maya's test chambers completed the drought cycle at 109 degrees Fahrenheit, then shifted into recovery. The first Sinclair chutes bent under stress, paused, and lifted again. The data line held. Maya placed the result beside the authorship file and sent only what ethics required: safety summary, independent architecture status, no Royce dependency. Not a performance. A door. That afternoon, the hearing chair's office requested Maya's availability as an independent technical witness. She read the message once. Then she picked up the red clipboard and wrote 3 words across the top sheet: bring the seeds. By the week of the National Food Security hearing, Donovan Royce no longer walked through rooms. He inspected them for loyalty. The estate command center had become colder than the greenhouses, not in temperature, but in the careful neutrality of everyone inside it. Screens showed crop maps bleeding from healthy green into warning gray. Remote test farms were flagged for delayed recovery. Government deployment timelines had been moved from confirmed to under review. The words looked clean on the dashboard. They were not clean to Donovan. They were exits. He stood at the head of the conference table in a black formal coat, both hands flat against the polished surface, speaking to people who had once leaned forward when he entered. Now the board representative looked at the data wall instead of at him. The investor relations officer kept every sentence narrow. The quiet assistant no longer rose before he gave an instruction. Small things. Fatal things. Loyalty did not announce its departure. It simply stopped anticipating you. Donovan asked for a full partner call. The compliance officer said the government partners preferred written technical responses until the hearing. Preferred. The word landed softly and took a piece of him with it. Isabella arrived late in a white cashmere wrap, carrying her phone against her chest like a shield. 3 days earlier, she would have stood beside him, angled toward the cameras, ready to translate his power into beauty. Now she stayed near the door. Her brand sponsors had paused 2 scheduled posts. The comments under her greenhouse tour had turned sharp, not cruel, but specific. Specific was worse. People were asking about Maya Sinclair. People were asking what Isabella actually knew. Donovan noticed her distance and hated her for it, because it proved what he had tried not to know. She had never worshipped him. She had worshipped the glow around him. "We need a unified message," he said. Isabella adjusted the edge of her wrap. "My team thinks I should step back until the technical review is complete." "My team, not our team." He stared at her, and for one thin second, the king of the land looked like a man locked outside his own gate. Then he covered it. "This is temporary," he said. "The estate line can be restored." The lead technician placed a report on the table, without sliding it toward him, only with author clearance. There it was again. Author. The word had become a blade, because it named the one thing his money could not become. Donovan had spent years turning Maya's mind into company language, donor language, husband language, legacy language. He had believed, if he repeated "my harvest" often enough, the origin would blur. But the plants would not blur. The data would not flatter him. The people around him had begun to understand that the man who owned the buildings did not own the instructions. At the downtown facility, Maya prepared for the hearing with a different kind of quiet. The Sinclair trial trays had recovered from drought cycling and entered nutrient interruption without collapse. The seedlings were not glamorous. They were credible. She placed 3 sample packets into a sealed evidence sleeve, clipped that sleeve beneath the red seed withdrawal protocol, and reviewed her testimony with the senior lawyer. No accusation beyond the facts. No revenge beyond verified sequence history. No emotion offered for public consumption. "They will try to make this personal," the senior lawyer said. Maya looked at the growth data. "It is personal," she said. "That is why it has to stay precise." Across town, Donovan attempted one last closed rehearsal before the hearing. He stood before the mock panel and delivered his statement about resilience, continuity, and the Royce mission. Halfway through, the board representative interrupted with a question he had avoided for days. "Can you confirm independent activation authority without DR?" "Sinclair?" Donovan paused too long. The room heard it. His hand tightened around the folder until the corner bent. He could speak to investors. He could charm donors. He could rename wings, replace seats, stage tours, and dress theft in strategy. But he could not say yes to a truth biology had already denied. His voice came back lower. "We are reviewing all technical pathways." No one corrected him. No one needed to. The answer was no. Isabella looked down at her phone. The investor relations officer closed the draft statement. The quiet assistant stopped taking notes. Donovan saw each tiny abandonment and felt his real fear open beneath him. Not bankruptcy, not headlines, not the hearing itself, but exposure. He was about to be seen as the man who had built a crown from someone else's intelligence, then banished the mind that kept it alive. The greenhouse cameras outside still showed rows of wheat. From a distance, some of them looked salvageable. Up close, the gray had reached the stem. Donovan came to Maya before the hearing because he still believed private rooms existed to save powerful men from public truth. He chose a restricted conference suite inside the National Food Security Building, not the main chamber, not the hallway where journalists waited, not the technical review room where the seed samples had already been logged. He wore a black suit with a dark coat folded over one arm, but the costume had lost its authority. It looked expensive. It did not look protective. Maya entered with the red clipboard beneath her left hand and 3 sealed seed packets in a clear evidence sleeve. She wore a tailored red jacket, her hair pulled back, her face calm in the way clean data was calm. Donovan stood when she came in. Isabella was not there. That absence said more than any apology he could have rehearsed. Maya, he began, careful now, almost formal. This has gone far enough. She placed the red clipboard on the table between them. Read the protocol. His eyes moved to it, then away. I read it. No, she said. You skimmed the part where you thought I was removable. The sentence landed with no raised voice. That made it harder for him to fight. Donovan drew a breath, through his nose, and sat opposite her. The hearing chair is going to ask whether Royce Agritech can recover the deployment line. Government partners are watching. Distribution contracts are at risk. You know what happens if those crops fail at scale. I do, Maya said. That is why they should never have been deployed without author clearance. His hand flattened on the table, the same gesture he used in boardrooms when he wanted the furniture to agree with him. I built the infrastructure. I funded the estate. I took the risk when no one else would touch experimental grain at this scale. You funded containers, Maya said. Not life. His jaw tightened. There it was. The old wound, freshly exposed. He could survive being called unfaithful. He could survive being called arrogant. What he could not survive was being separated from creation. Donovan leaned forward, lowering his voice, as if intimacy could still disguise pressure. Put your name back on it. We can issue a corrected authorship statement. I will restore your board seat under a technical oversight title. You can have credit. You can have whatever public language you want. Maya looked at him for a long moment. Once, that offer might have hurt differently. Now it sounded like a man trying to rent back the brain he had evicted. You still think this is about credit? It is about food security. No, she said. It became about food security when your branding failed. He looked toward the door, toward the chamber beyond it, toward the people who no longer moved when he expected them to move. His voice hardened because softness had not worked. Do not punish the mission because you are angry at me. Maya opened the red clipboard and turned the sign page toward him. The clause was highlighted in red. Original author retains activation authority upon unauthorized commercial reassignment. This is not anger, she said. This is governance. Donovan stared at the clause, and for the first time, he did not look like a billionaire. He looked like a man reading the limits of his own myth. Maya placed one sealed packet beside the document. These seeds can recover under my architecture. Yours cannot because you removed the author and kept the shell. Maya, you own the fences, Donovan. You never owned the life inside them. The room went still around the sentence. Not dramatic. Final. His fingers curled once against the table, then released. The confession he could not speak sat between them anyway. He had not betrayed her because Isabella was extraordinary. He had betrayed her because Isabella made him feel extraordinary, without requiring him to understand anything. Maya gathered the evidence sleeve and closed the clipboard. At the hearing, I will answer every technical question truthfully. I will provide public safety options through verified channels. I will not authorize Royce deployment. Donovan's eyes lifted, sharper now, afraid enough to be honest for half a second. And me? Maya stood. You kept the land. She slid the red clipboard beneath her arm. Now explain why it stopped growing. Then she left him in the conference suite, surrounded by polished wood, sealed glass, and the silence of a room that no longer belonged to him. Power was never the title on a gate or the name stamped across a deed. It was not the black car waiting outside a hearing room, not the board seat polished for a man who confused applause with authorship, not the cameras that could make a lie look clean for one beautiful afternoon. Real power was quieter. It was the intelligence a woman carried out with her when the doors finally locked behind her. It was the clause no one respected until it became the only clause that mattered. It was the skill that could not be evicted, the discipline that did not ask betrayal for permission, and the future that kept growing after the wrong people stopped touching it. Maya Sinclair did not become free because Donovan Royce collapsed. She became free because his collapse no longer defined the size of her life. Months after the National Food Security hearing, the Royce estate still existed behind its long black fence, but the fence had lost its mythology. The experimental greenhouses had been reduced to controlled salvage zones. Government partners had withdrawn from the disputed deployment line. Distribution contracts had dissolved into cautious language and investor confidence had moved elsewhere without ceremony. Donovan was not dragged out by spectacle. He was simply left out of rooms where the future was being discussed. That was worse. Isabella Croft disappeared from sustainability campaigns almost as softly as she had entered them, rebranding herself through vague wellness language that never mentioned seed architecture, activation failure, or the woman whose work she had once tried to wear like a white dress. The internet remembered enough. The industry remembered more. At the center of the new conversation stood a different facility downtown, built not for luxury tours, but for survival. Maya's Sinclair Civic Grain Initiative had grown from 3 sealed seed packets into a network of ethical licensing agreements, public research partnerships, and climate-resilient trials across regions that needed food security more than branding. She refused to sell panic. She sold verified growth. In the largest indoor field of her facility, rows of golden wheat moved beneath calibrated grow lights, each stalk tagged, through a transparent data system that showed recovery strength, heat tolerance, drought response, and authorship history. No marble balcony overlooked it. No influencer walked between the rows pretending image could replace stewardship. The workers there wore clean gloves, plain badges, and the serious faces of people trusted with living systems. Maya stood at the edge of the field in a deep red coat, holding a handful of perfect grain in her palm. The seeds looked ordinary to anyone who did not understand them. To her, they were memory, instruction, proof, and promise. The lead journalist asked if she considered what happened to Royce Agritech revenge. Maya looked across the golden rows before answering. No, she said. Revenge looks backward. This feeds forward. That became the line quoted everywhere, but it was not the image that lasted. The image that lasted was Maya walking alone down the center aisle of her own wheat field, her red coat cutting through the gold, her hand brushing the heads of grain, with the calm of a woman who no longer needed to be named by a man's empire to know what she had built. At the far end of the field, she stopped, lifted one perfect seed between 2 fingers, and looked toward the camera with stillness, not triumph. The future did not belong to the loudest owner. It belonged to the woman who understood how life begins. This story is a fictional narrative created for entertainment, reflection, and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real people, places, or events is purely coincidental.